you'll never convince me that Venezuela was not about Epstein. They got 2 million more files. You know how many mentions there were of the Epstein story, let's say in the week leading up to Venezuela compared to the week after? It would be breathtaking. In his mind, this has worked.
James, Trump and his knee-jerk Republican followers are ecstatic over the capture of Venezuelan dictator Maduro. The military and the intelligence operation was brilliant, no question. And Maduro is a really bad guy, crooked, brutal, illicitly held office, no question. In addition to most Republicans, even some experts I usually respect, like retired General Wesley Clark, said this may really be a good thing and may send an important message to other countries. I think the downsides are greater, and I pay more attention to Ann Applebaum, Max Boot, Walter Pincus, who see really potentially grave dangers ahead. First, what was the mission? What was the purpose? What was the goal? Trump had originally said it was because Maduro was a big drug dealer, peddling fentanyl and killing Americans. Well, actually, it's not true. Maduro peddled illegal drugs, but it wasn't fentanyl, and most of it was not to the United States. Moreover, you'll recall it was just a couple weeks ago, or actually a few months ago, that Trump pardoned the former Honduran president, who really was a huge drug dealer. So the drug case was a lie. Maduro did lose the last election and then stole it. So this was about restoring democracy, maybe? No. Trump has stiffed the opposition leader, Maria Machado. First, he resents the fact that she won the Nobel Peace Prize rather than him, and he doesn't care about democracy anyway. So the new line is it's about oil. But that's a long-term prospect, and Trump wants to get his cut more quickly. One thing Trump does get right, however, James, for now, he runs it. And as Colin Powell famously said, when you break it, you own it. And there are a lot of people, bad people down there, including Maduro's interior and defense ministers who still are in control. Venezuela is not Canada with just a bad leader. I think the polls today show the American people break even on the question. That's bad news because things, I believe, are only going to get worse.
So, so you hear this. People say, well, there was justification for it. It was a massively corrupt government that did not respect election returns.
Right.
Okay. Well, under that theory, would somebody be entitled to invade the United States? We have a massively corrupt government. Our government does not believe in election returns. I mean, stop and think about it. And of course, anytime the idea, Steve Miller said, look, this is the way the world is. We reward strength. Strength is what counts. That was the way the world was until 1945. From 1945 until 2016, 17, and more accurately, probably since 2025, did say we're not just not about might. That we had treaties, we had things that you could do, you couldn't do, you were constrained. If you didn't like a regime, it didn't give you a justification to go in and change it. Don't tell me Noriega because there's so many differences that get blue in the face explaining. But now that we said that doesn't count, and you have spheres of influence, and good, we can take Greenland, Russia can take Ukraine, China can take Taiwan, because, well, if it might makes right, in each instance, one side has more might than the other side. But that, of course, will lead you to the first part of the 20th century. In case you forgot, it didn't go well. It didn't go well.
No, it sure didn't. I think you're right. I would hate to be in Taiwan's shoes right now because if we say we have the right in our hemisphere to throw out a bad guy, a place that we think is being illegitimately run, the Chinese think the same thing about Taiwan. I don't agree with them, but that's what they think. Their case is equally strong. And I see, some of the right wing columnists like Eli Lake pretend that that's just sophistry. Well, it's not. And I think that's exactly. I don't think that even bothers Trump that much. I think the idea the world can be divided in 3 or 4 parts, all run by strong men like him, is something that I think he actually probably cottons to. But I think going back to Venezuela, right now, all the Maduro regime is still in charge, and they are actually arresting and harassing people who are pro-democracy. And are all those down there making bucks off of drugs? Are they going to be able to continue? Will they just be peaceful citizens as Trump runs the place? Will the bribes and shakedowns be the same? And maybe even more important, about 67%, an estimated 67% of Venezuelans voted against Maduro. They don't like that regime, which is still in place. So they're going to say, "Well, we got Daddy Don." I don't think so. So I think the oil companies are not rushing to get in. So James, I'm wondering what is the good news ahead? What can we look to say? I don't know on March 14th and say, boy, things are really going to look great then.
I really have no idea. And I think every bad act is within 1,500 miles of Venezuela is pouring into Venezuela. They're seeing stories that there's violence on the streets, there's protests, there's a incompetent government, there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of places that you can hide. I think it's going to turn into a pit of every bad person that we can find on this hemisphere. Some of them coming from out to the other side of the hemisphere. I can't imagine this guy, but I'm fascinated by it because I've reduced everything to politics. Excuse me. That's what I do. The I think that Marco Rubio is stepping into one of the great traps of all time, and that they're saying he's the viceroy of Venezuela, which I don't know anybody wants that job. Of course, Trump doesn't care what he does, but Marco Rubio says he does what he does. And if you look, J.D. Vance has done a pretty good job of keeping his distance here. You can see that J.D. is making a bet that anything first was make, this thing is going to hell in a handbasket. And how lucky can I be that little Marco is the man in charge? He's the point man. I think I would just let him have that. I think there's real underlying dynamic in Republican presidential politics that's at play here. And I am not, Trump's so crazy, you don't know, but maybe remember, Rubio was really critical of Trump, as was Vance, but maybe Rubio more pointed in his critiques of Trump in 2016 than anybody else. And I don't discount the
Small
possibility.
hands.
Yeah, small
Yeah.
hands. I don't discount the possibility that Trump I hear this shit all the time. Oh, I heard Mark Halpin was on Smirconish this morning saying, there's a lot more strategy behind what Trump does in the mainstream press. Oh, come on, man. Give me a fucking break. Strategy behind what? But there might have been a strategy in letting old Senator Marco out there to dry. I don't know. But I'll just make that possibility that this is a real opening salvo in a 2028 Republican presidential nominating process.
I think that's right. I would say, as a quick aside, having worked with Mark Halpert and watched him now, I don't believe a goddamn thing he says. So, but that is an aside. I think Marcos, the thing he cares about the most is Cuba. Now, I'm not sure Cuba may not be in trouble. Cuba was getting its oil from Venezuela. I don't know where they're going to replace it. I'm not sure China and Russia really want to run to Cuba's defense. They may. But I think that's what Marco mainly cares about. But, Viceroy of Venezuela, no, that's not what you want. James, the other thing, Trump is full of hubris now. And he's talking about Greenland. We're going to go. And I've always thought that's just Trump bluster. And I still basically do. If he really wanted to do something in Greenland, he could just expand the bases that we have there now. I mean, that's easy to do. If he were to try to take over Greenland by force or not, that would end NATO because they're a Danish country and they're part of Denmark. Denmark is a NATO partner, and the Article 5 says if one country is assaulted, then everybody comes to their defense. Trump doesn't have any beliefs, James. People said, well, he's an America firster, so he's an isolationist. Well, he's an isolationist unless, force is easy. That's why Venezuela worked. It's all about him. And so, therefore, I don't know there's any great strategy for Greenland or any place else. And I don't think there was any strategy for Venezuela. This is just a very simple bottom line. Everything Trump does is all about him and making money.
Well, you'll never convince me that Venezuela was not about Epstein. They got 2 million more files. You know how many mentions there were of the Epstein story, let's say, in the week leading up to Venezuela compared to the week after? It would be breathtaking. In his mind, this has worked. Now, the Greenland stuff, I go back to what I said, is if the theory is might makes right, is what Stephen Miller is the White House articulation of the theory, then any strong nation is entitled to take any less than strong nation. We did that in history, and it led to catastrophic consequences. Post 1945, we said we'd do things different. We'd try to set up rules, order for international relations, and very stringent demarcation between you couldn't invade a sovereign nation. You had to recognize the sovereignty, et cetera, et cetera. And, we had stupid wars from 1945 through 2025, but they weren't they were just stupid. They weren't like World War I or World War II, which was on the stupid scales you can't even imagine. And so we'd known relative peace for that whole time. And now that era might be gone. I mean, I tried. It worked pretty good.
If Stephen Miller is right, and that's American policy, what case is there against China taking Taiwan?
Well, what's the case if I'm 81 years old? Okay, I walk out of my condo and a 19-year-old decides that this guy's got money in his pocket. He possessing it is not as strong as I am. He beat his ass in a second. He's scared to death of me. I'm just going to say, give me your money. I'm going to slug you in the face. So I'll give him my money, obviously. And that's essentially the way the world used to operate. That's the way that Stephen Miller thinks the world operate. We changed that world for the better. That no, you're not in possession of that. And just because you're stronger than me and can beat my ass, you're not entitled to that. That's just what happened in foreign policy. And we're saying, no, let's go back to if he's stronger than you and beat your ass, then you got to turn over your money to him. Provided we get a cut.
Oh, that's a big provided. I mean, that's man.
And 25% in this transaction, James.
That in Trump world is called the ball game, James.
Yeah, you see, this for him, this for you. You know what I mean? That is
right. Yeah. Well, that's why you know a lot more than I do about oil, just living in Louisiana. But I think there are a lot of skeptics that the oil industry has a whole lot of interest in investing billions in Venezuela right now. And it won't be a short term, it'll be a long-term project. And again, Trump's got to get his cut.
Okay. So I don't, I'm hardly an expert, but I have friends in all business. I understand a little bit about it. First of all, it's a very hard business to run because what you do today may not see effect for 7 years. So if you just say, okay, there's oil here, and if we go to do it, we got to assume that if the price of oil is the equivalent of $2,026, $78 a barrel, you can make money. Anything under that, you're going to lose some money. But if it goes up, you're going to make a good, unbelievable money. That decision is made 7 years into the future. And that means the government has to be stable. Everything has to be just right. The other thing that I'm told by people in industry, the oil is described as sweet or sour. If the oil is described as sweet, it means it doesn't have a lot of byproducts. It doesn't have a lot of sulfur. So when you go on a refining project, it's easier to do. It has less consequences. I am told that a large amount of the Venezuelan oil is sour. It's not as valuable. It takes it's more toxic, it's more environmentally bad. And of course, you don't have to tell me, I don't have to tell you where the refineries are that take the Venezuelan crude, because they're in Louisiana, because the shit we get, they're going to give it to us. And so, for a lot of reasons, I don't know if this is a great idea. And then, of course, Trump is seizing them for the oil companies. Well, it did get a lot in international court, and the next president's a Democrat, going to say we don't have a right to seize any country's oil and give it to our oil companies. That's not right. Under what theory did we go in and seize it?
Yeah.
Max Boot said during the Iraq War, people said it's about oil, and they were very careful not to mention it. They were very careful to have, the oil was going to stay in Iraq and everything else. Now, yeah, it's all about the oil. We're going and take it. I'm taking it. They're going to have to pay me. And remember the meeting at Mar-a-Lago during the campaign at Harold Hamhead, when they said, if you give me $1 billion, I'll let you do whatever you want. I wonder if there's not some aftermath to that holy transaction.
Well, I'm shocked, of course, but I'm sure there is. Except, as you've noted and others, I'm not sure the industry is crazy to get to Venezuela
I don't
anytime
either. No,
soon.
Daniel Yergin knows more about this than any 15 people, and I hadn't seen what he's written yet. I'm sure he has, but he's of the opinion that these guys are not at all chomping at the bit to get down there.
Right, right. Just going to close on the political note, as I say, I think the polls, if I were Trump, I would be discouraged by these polls. After Iraq and after Noriega, 70, 80, 90% of the people support it. The beginning is always easier. And if this is the same, then the fact that they're at best at kind of 50-50 or one-third, one-third, one-third is really bad news.
Well, yes, I think you even spinning it is better news than it is. All
Yeah.
right, and the big number is the third support.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and anybody given the option is going to say anybody. It's amazing that a third didn't take the option and just said it's flat out bad. But if you look at, to be fair, when you watch a lot of the commentary, well, based on what we know now, it's never come out. Well, everybody's kind of hedging. Well, maybe they'll come in and they'll set up a new regime, and it'll all be milk and honey, and that's not going to happen. Please, but people like to hedge on that. The one thing that been my experience in Venezuela, and I point this out, this was some time ago, I did not detect food insecurity. No, I didn't see massive any kind of evidence that there was hunger. It was poverty, like, yes, but would not, there's no place that you would want to be. But I did not see emaciated kids. I've been hidden from me. My airport to downtown Caracas to meetings to some restaurant and back to the airport. But you might be buying into a lot of food insecurity here, because they import a lot of this stuff. I don't know that this thing could go very, very poorly.
Yeah, and the idea of having to pour billions of dollars into Venezuela right now is not something that's going to help them in the
What about the money
midterms.
we put into Argentina?
Right.
By the way,
Took care of those bonds.
Citgo, which was the Venezuelan oil company, Paul Singer just bought a big stake in Citgo. He's also the guy that made all the money on the distressed Argentine bonds. And as you recall, he's also the sainted man that had an empty seat on his G5 at Dulles Airport, but graciously allowed Justice Samuel Alito a seat on the airplane to go, which just happened to be a high-end fishing trip at some lodge in Alaska. But that would be the same person. But we wouldn't want to talk about that. We would talk about his stake in Citgo and how much more it's worth and how much they're going to go through it, because, well, that wouldn't be right. And you wouldn't talk about a Supreme Court justice because, as I'm told by the chief for Supreme Court correspondent at CBS, is you can disagree with them, but you really can't say that they're corrupt. Yeah, I can say they're corrupt because all the evidence points to that.
Well, and I'm sure Mr. Singer would not like to be reminded in the spring of 2016, he was the one that first put up the money to try to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. before he got the nomination.
That became,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this guy, he's interesting, and he seems to be at the center of a lot of this, from Argentine bonds to Venezuelan oil to Alaska fishing trips to 2016. There's a lot here. Gee, I wonder why somehow or another, we just can't seem to talk about this gentleman.
Well, we can change that. This is, let's just every week let's do a Venezuela check, James. Sometimes we
Okay.
can just do it in 30 seconds, but
All right.
let's just see how things are going in every week.